common sense government.
American, young, old, rich, poor.
My name is Paul Krissel, and I'm a former member of the Governor's Commission on Senior Services, so I was asked to do two things this afternoon. One is to moderate this panel, but the other was to present two reports that came out of the Governor's Commission over the last year and talk a little bit about those, and then I'll moderate the rest of the panel. So I think it's helpful, at least for me, to describe a little bit about the privilege I bring into this room around retirement security, because my good experience on retirement security informs how I look at the problems in the system around retirement security. So I'm 67 years old. I know I look 40, but I'm 67. When I was 56, my employer needed to cut back staff. Now, fortunately for me, I had a union negotiated pension plan and I had a union negotiated seniority system, so they couldn't just throw me out. So they had to sit down with some of us who had the time to retire and say, look, we can keep some of the younger workers if you folks will just kind of take the pension. And it didn't take a little bit of sweetener because we already had a good situation. I had a pension that pays the bills. At age 56, I had a pension, a union negotiated pension that pays the bills. I could then start my own business in consulting at that time because I had the luxury of both the pension to pay the bills and retiree health care. How many people have those today? Not just a working stiff. I was working in a union job, I have a pension, pays the bills, and I have retiree health care. So I started my business as a consultant, finished my master's degree that year after I retired. And because I could put money aside when I was working for a living because I made a decent pay, and because I could continue a consulting business even while I had the pension, I could put more money aside. What did that allow me to do? That allowed me to hold, I'm 67, I don't have to draw Social Security until I'm 70, so I have the additional advantage of getting that 8% gain on Social Security every year. Because I had the three-legged stool, pension plan, savings, Social Security. So not many people have that anymore, but that informs my thinking about the work we did on the Governor's Commission. And let's first look at the Aging Workforce Report we did in 2015. Now, it's not directly related to retirement security, but I think there's a nexus there. We chose to look at people over the age of 50 or 55 who have to work. We knew there are other people looking at people who want to work, making the work more meaningful, using older workers more effectively to mentor other workers, all great stuff. But we know there's a lot of people out there age 50 and over who have no choice. They don't have any other financial choice but to keep working. And they're more frequently laid off. They're more frequently discriminated against as older workers. So when we looked at that group of workers, we found a couple of things. First of all, we found that there's a lack of data disaggregating the intersection between race and age discrimination. So that was a problem that we looked at. We know the two are interconnected. We know that age discrimination exists, and we know that if you're a person of color, the barriers are probably greater. We know that because we have other things we do know. People of color earn less money on average over their lifetime. They're out of the workforce more often during their lifetime. All those things have an impact on retirement security, on your ability to save money or work in a job that has a pension. But without the data, we still came up with a number of recommendations we thought were important. We thought there's really two sides, and there's two parts of this equally important. One is there are a lot of employers out there that do want to collaborate and figure out ways to look at aging as an asset and figure out how to bring back into the workforce older workers. So we had some recommendations around supporting and incentivizing collaboratives and a number of things that we could do to work with employers who want to do the right thing and figure out a way to make it possible to bring older workers back into the workforce, looking at retraining and that kind of thing. But we also said, on the other side, we need to strengthen our age discrimination laws. If you look at what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years, what existing laws around the book have been kind of torn apart. The burden has shifted to the person who alleges discrimination to prove that discrimination was the reason that they were let go, rather than the burden being on the employer. So two recommendations we had. One is the legal basis for determining age discrimination needs to be improved. We need to improve our laws so that the burden of proof shifts back to the employer if there's a reasonable likelihood that discrimination was based on age. And the same applies to gender and race and other areas of discrimination. The laws have been eroded in the same way. And the other was we need to increase enforcement. We needed to give agencies like BOLI more responsibility to be able, and more authority to be able to deal with patterns of discrimination. So, for example, the Intel layoffs that occurred. You probably all saw in the Oregonian the data on the age distribution of those layoffs. But without a definite proof that any one of those individuals was laid off due to their age, you don't have anything you can go after on age discrimination. But if you had laws that talked about, that gave BOLI the authority to look at patterns and look at pattern discrimination, and a stronger law to back that up, you might be able to do something about layoffs where older people are disproportionately impacted. So that gets me to the next report, which was the report that came out of the White House Conference on Aging last year. And that conference we had a session that focused on retirement security. A couple different recommendations that came out of there, specifically on Social Security, that we remove the cap on earnings that are subject to the tax. That would completely solve any problem, by the way. That would completely solve any shortfall in Social Security. We also, in addition to that, felt that the Consumer Price Index for the elderly ought to be used to index cost of living adjustments to that. And the minimum benefit should be increased to be at least 120% of poverty. So Social Security itself ought to be shored up and strengthened. But also, we had a couple of other recommendations. One is to eliminate wage inequality related to gender, race, ethnicity, and age discrimination, because that wage inequality creates a lifetime that leads to not having the assets for secure retirement. And then we had a whole number of recommendations around rebuilding the defined benefit plans. We've had a race to the bottom on pension plans. After World War II, there was a great increase in the number of defined benefit plans where people could work for a living and retire in security, having that leg of the stool. We had this race to the bottom on, let's start 401ks and get rid of defined benefit. Fine, 401k you invest for a lifetime. It's a lot more difficult than investing in perpetuity. And we proceeded to gut defined benefit pension plans. So what we recommended was that those plans be strengthened, and that all the structures it takes to strengthen those plans be put in place, which includes strengthening unions' ability to negotiate those plans, strengthening the financial definitions around those plans, and strengthening portability. 40 years ago, I was on a pension fund board of trustees that also included Canadian unions. And when 401ks were being promoted, it was, well, people are moving a lot of different jobs, and if you have a pension plan, you know, you're not going to be able to, if you have a defined benefit pension plan, you can't take that with you from job to job. So you have all these little bits and pieces of pension plan. Canada solved that 40 years ago. They have a law that requires portability of defined benefit pension plans, so you take your benefits with you as you move around. So there are solutions to these issues, and now we're going to hear from our panelists on some of the implementations of some of those solutions. One of the recommendations from the White House Council, the White House Conference on Aging, was to promote the piece of legislation that became law for a retirement savings plan here in Oregon, and Juanita Santana is going to talk to us about that.
Good afternoon. As a couple of presenters talk before me, we are, the number of us is increasing, not only in Oregon, but across the nation. And also, and I would like to say that the good news for all of us is that we are living longer. So it is estimated that a healthy 65-year-old is looking at about approximately 20 years, additional years of life, and that is an average. That means that some of us maybe have 25 up to 30 years to live. Let me see, this moving the slide?
It's the left hand.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so as you can see in the slide, there is a chart that shows the increase in life expectancy. But also, Also, research, as you can see in the slide, indicates that the average savings for household is approximately $3,000. If you looked in the average household savings nearing retirement age is about $12,000. As we can see, the level of current savings represented will not take an individual through 1 year of retirement, much less 20 or more years. In Oregon, Treasurer Ted Wheeler stated that we have a generational crisis that is going to affect families from coast to coast in the country if we don't find a solution for this problem. You can see the number, estimated number in the United States is 60 million Americans do not have the option to save and work, and as many as 1 million Oregonians do not have the option to save and work also. So you have, and then we have a study conducted by the U.S. Government Accountability Office. It was conducted in 2013, found that only about 14% or 1 in 7 of businesses with 100 or less employees offered a retirement plan. And between 51 and 71% of roughly 42 million people who work for a small business lack the ability to save for retirement. We have in Oregon, as was mentioned by Paul earlier, that we have a program that was based in the recommendations of an state task force. And in 2015, legislature created the Oregon Retirement Savings Plan. And today, I'm very glad to share with you that the state is on track to implement the program by July 2017, and making Oregon the first to launch a state-based retirement plan in the country. So we can be proud of that. Let me see. Who is it for? The Oregon Retirement Saving Plan is for any person 18 years of age or older whose employer does not offer a retirement plan. 600,000 people are estimated to work for an employer who does not offer a retirement plan presently. 200,000 more are not included in their employer's current plan, and there's a number of reasons for that. Maybe the length of time that an employee needs to be with an organization to qualify for it. And then we have another 200,000 who are self-employed. So these numbers are for Oregon only. It's about 1 million people who could benefit from the Oregon Retirement Savings Plan. Let's see. The Oregon Retirement Savings Board is striving for a simple plan design for a program. The board is considering national as well as international research and best practices to select the best options to ensure that the Oregon plan will offer a simple and a streamlined path for employers to provide a retirement savings option without a mandate from the state to create a workplace-based plan. So this won't be a work-based plan. It will be an estate plan that the employees will own on their own. For example, some of the things that we're looking into to make it simple. For example, the plan will have a payroll deduction and a plan that is portable and transferable. These characteristics, we believe, that will facilitate and encourage plan participation across the state. Same. How will it work? Basically, the plan is that the employer, let me put all of this down on there you go. Employer automatically will enroll the employees in the plan and will set up a payroll deduction if the employee doesn't opt out, because the employee will have the option to opt out of the program. The program, the savings will be invested in a fee Roth IRA account that belongs to the employee, and he will be able to take it with them whatever if they change employment. And then a private sector plan administrator will communicate directly with the worker about options and performance. One of the main concerns from the board, and that we've been working diligently and considering the concerns from the employers. Thank you. The employers, so the employers won't be, they won't have a problem or too much work they won't have nothing to do with the plan itself. The only thing they will be doing will be enrolling the employee and then making the payroll deductions. Let's see. I'm running out of time. Okay. I would like to say that active aging policy is defined as optimizing opportunities for health, participation, and security to enhance quality of life as people age. The active aging approach is grounded in the United Nations recognized principles of independence, participation, dignity, care, and self-fulfillment. Unfortunately, the bottom line is that Social Security alone is not enough to retire with dignity after a lifetime of work. According to the most recent data available, 31% of Black and 46% of Latinos are in the bottom 25% income group for people who are 60 years old. Women still make 80 cents for each dollar earned by men, which makes it even more difficult for us to save for retirement. And yet, we live 3 years longer than men do. The consequences to all of us, and especially for future generations, will be enormous if too many are tapping into safety net programs. And this was such an, today, all day, with all of the panels that I was listening to, we all were being challenged by the lack of resources and the growth and the need, given the growth in the population. Oops, let's see. Yeah, the Oregon Retirement Savings Plan Board is responsible for overseeing the implementation of the plan and has been working diligently with its executive director, Ms. Lisa Messina, and her staff. And throughout this summer, the board conducted a series of public work group meetings to gather information in the areas of outreach and engagement, financial literacy, program plan, and program design. Through these public forums, the board listened to key community stakeholders and learned from their expertise and experience, as well as of their concerns, which the board has been addressing and will continue to address as we move forward. Thank you. Right in time, I think.
Okay, next we have David Rothwell, who's going to give us a presentation about some statistics around aging, so around retirement security.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Rothwell. It's a pleasure to be here. As a native Oregonian, I spent half my life away, and it's nice to be back and to hear all of the positive things that are going on in the state on these aging and disability issues. I have the fortune or misfortune of having the most technical and narrow-focused presentation today, and I'm going to be talking about financial literacy, which is really important and connects quite closely to what Juanita was talking about. And so I'll go ahead and present this. This is work with my co-author, John Geldof, in our department here, Human Development and Family Studies at OSU. Okay, so I'm going to skip the background. I prepared a 15-minute talk and then was told I have 8. So I'm going to skip through some of this. You have the slides, and by all means contact me if you have any questions. But to sum it up, financial literacy is also referred to as financial knowledge, is the ability to process economic information towards making informed decisions about your finances. Okay, it's what you know about managing money. We know that low financial literacy is related to a lot of things, like not planning for retirement. It's related to making financial mistakes and so on. Several countries have embarked on an effort to measure financial literacy among their populations, the US included. There's been national surveys that have been conducted in 2009, 2012, and 2015, and this is some of the data that I'll be presenting here. The focus of this particular research topic is on measurement, and I know that's a very technical topic. My co-author is a psychometrician who specializes in measurement of psychological constructs, and this is important though, and I provide a couple quotes here just saying if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. There's a longer quote there from Nobel laureate Angus Deaton on the importance of measurement in your handouts as well. Okay, so we put a couple questions here. Overall, we want to know how well does this survey measure financial literacy. We want to look at Oregonians compared to the national measurements. We want to look at how is financial literacy measured among those approaching retirement compared to those in the retirement age. And then we want to look at one important difference that has been noted in the literature, and that's males versus females in terms of financial literacy. Okay, so that's what we did. Here's the data. This is a national survey. There's a web page. This is a screenshot. You can go and see. But there's fairly large national samples, around 27,000 per year. And this means that there's about 500 respondents in Oregon per year, and we use survey weighting techniques to represent state and national totals. I'm going to skip through here due to time. You have them there. But this is the measure of financial literacy that was implemented in the survey each year. These 5 questions. Maybe I'll just read the first one here to give us an idea. Suppose you have $100 in a savings account earning 2% interest a year. After 5 years, how much would you have? That's a multiple choice question. I just provide the correct answer. Okay, more than 102. It was not the precise amount. And anyway, there's a couple true-false questions and another multiple choice question. So with these questions, researchers like myself and several others have been trying to analyze the financial literacy of the country. This is a technical slide where we're interested in the construct of financial literacy as measured by these items. And we use some technical terms to do that, and I'm happy to talk with any graduate students or methods people after about that, but I'll skip that for now. Okay, so here in this slide, we see the national percent of those five items that were correct. Okay, so that first question I read out loud, 76% of Americans got that correct. In Oregon, also 76 got it correct. So on that one, we're on par with the national averages. And here are the numbers for the rest of them. We're a little bit better on the question number 2, very slightly worse on number 3, better on 4, and better on 5. Overall, 41% of Oregonians could answer 4 or more of those questions correct, and only 40% of Americans. All of these differences are not meaningful. They're not statistically different. So, in other words, the financial literacy of Oregons overall is similar to the nation. But we want to look at, of course, older adults in the sample. So we kind of narrow the sample down to those aged 55 to 64 and 65 and over. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, financial literacy, retirement security, economic planning and saving, this has a lot to do with income. And what we do is we adjust all of our analyses for income. What this graph shows is your predicted financial literacy score by your income. And as you can see, it's a pretty much linear increase in scores. Lower people have lower financial literacy. People with higher incomes have much higher. All the results that we present have removed this influence of income, and so we're able to look at differences after accounting for income. Okay, so this is just some technical language. I'm going to skip to the main points here, which is when we look at Oregonians compared to the rest of the country, the measurement lines up pretty well. We don't see any differences, both in how it's measured on all the items and across, in measurement terms, the latent mean scores. There's no difference. So I don't know what you were expecting. Maybe older Oregonians had higher or lower than the national average, but we don't find any difference no matter how hard we looked in the data. Okay, so next one is how about those in retirement age compared to those approaching retirement? For this, this is for Oregonians, okay? So for this, we didn't find any difference either. However, older folks, those 65 and older, had higher financial literacy scores. So in other words, the measurement is good across groups, but the older group has higher financial literacy scores than those approaching retirement. One of the bigger differences we see, though, is on our last research question on gender differences. So it's a little bit technical, but we don't see any differences in measurement between men and women who are older adults. However, we see really quite large differences in financial literacy scores in the direction of older male Oregonians having much higher financial literacy than women. This has been found in international research, and I'm coming at this really from a data perspective, and these gaps are large, and they're removing the influence of income. So this is a big difference that we could not remove no matter what we controlled for. Okay, so overall, we do find that the measurement is consistent across age, gender, and location. So we have a good measure of financial literacy here. This is just repeating that point. So I have a few takeaways here. So the measurement is good, and that's helpful because now it allows us to proceed to more meaningful questions. The financial literacy of Oregonians is not different than the rest of the country. We needed to confirm that. However, we see really big differences. Let me rephrase that. We see differences between older and younger, and we see big differences between men and women. And I think this is really something to talk about from a policy perspective. I think we should really think about increasing economic security to target those approaching retirement, and then specifically women. This is the results. There's limitations. This is a survey. This is not, it does only target 500 people per year in Oregon. Nevertheless, we do everything we can to account for those limitations of a reported survey. Looking forward in this line of research, there's a number of opportunities to connect financial literacy to much more interesting things like retirement savings, preparation, emergency savings, and things that are more concretely rooted in economic security. And I guess I'll close just by saying that, I think this topic of financial literacy and economic security is a form of healthy aging that Carolyn was talking about. We're not studying these things because we're purely interested in financial literacy. It's so that people can live long and healthy lives after they retire. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, finally we have Robynn Pease.
So I have the pleasure of being your last speaker before you get to go home. So thank you very much for staying this long. And it's I started my career in aging services and found my way into work life, the field of work life, which are organizational supports. One of the more important things I've been able to do through my work as a work life director is support and start caregiver support support groups in the workplace. And our caregivers are very stressed, and providing them the support and giving them the resources that many of you provide in the community on site has helped them tremendously stay productive, stay engaged and do that important work, not only on the work site, but also at home. So I have the privilege of sort of wrapping things up, and as you know, you've heard a lot about the importance of healthy aging and the importance of robust retirement savings as they relate to quality of life in later years. And we've heard a lot about the importance of financial literacy and opportunities for individual savings plans as foundations for retirement security. And right now, I just want to broaden our perspective to think about retirement security as, a means to well-being in later life. And what I mean by well-being in later life are simply, we know that well-being in later life typically encompasses good health, the meeting of basic needs such as shelter, safety, nutrition, access to health care, enjoyable and reliable social networks, and meaningful activities and purposes. And clearly, as we know, one's financial history, accumulative wealth, access to benefits such as our Medicare and Social Security, access to important resources such as baby geriatric physicians, viable transportation, form the foundation of enjoying a desired level of retirement security, along with meaningful activities such as working and volunteering, a sense of purpose, and ongoing opportunities for social interaction. And while these activities and purpose do not cost money, we know the accumulative effects of education, good physical health can influence our choices. And at the same time, one's informal social networks, such as family and friends, are not necessarily dependent on financial wealth. However, our formal social networks, such as senior centers, assisted living, are certainly dependent on community resources, availability, and affordability. So as we've heard, changing economic and social forces have altered the landscape for retirement savings as we have known it. Factors such as, and I want to sort of expand on what Paul mentioned earlier when he introduced us. Factors such as high student debt. For example, in 2013, more than 6 in 10 of our Oregon college graduates left school owing an average of more than $26,000. And increasing costs of basic needs, for example, child care. Oregon ranks as one of the top 10 in the U.S. with the least affordable child care, with parents spending an average of 18% of their income for it. And then, of course, our economic recession and the lowering of real wages, where we have over 400,000 Oregonians employed in low-wage work, all negatively impact Oregonians' ability to save in the traditional sense. And as we've talked about all along, Oregonians are living longer with an average life expectancy of 79.2, which will then require more care. So what do we do? And in closing today's panel, I want to offer up a couple of suggestions to positively contribute to our retirement security. So I want to talk about two. I want to emphasize the importance of employment for older adults, and I want to again reintroduce the idea of the importance of designing livable communities. So we've heard from other panelists today about speakers about the importance of keeping older adults, giving them the opportunities to stay in the workforce. And I'd like to add that simply the opportunity to actively and intentionally recruit older adults. As we know, older adults are staying in the labor force longer because of financial necessity or for meaningful engagement and purpose. According to the Oregon Employment Department, Oregonian labor force participation rates right now are for the ages 55 to 64-year-olds in 2015 was 62.8%, and of Oregonians 65 years and older, it was 19.9%. And we know that our older workers contribute knowledge and skills and experience and networks and entrepreneurship, time and resources, yet we know that they are often overlooked for younger workers who may be regarded as simply more adaptable to the modern workplace. And this was discovered this instance was discovered actually by the Lane Workforce Partnership Training Program, when the program assisted local call centers and banks with their recruitment needs for operators and tellers. The older workers that were subsequently hired for these jobs proved to be more reliable, less transient, more comfortable with face-to-face interaction, and were more client-focused than the college student population initially recruited, resulting in 85% retention rates, right? They were recruiting from the University of Washington. And they just completely missed the mark. The key to the program's success was their understanding of older workers' motivation for work and their desirability for flexible work options. Older workers want and need the flexibility. As we mentioned, they are caring for grandchildren. They are caring for other older adults. They want flexibility to pursue other meaningful activities. So again, it's important to make the match between what the employers need and what the older workers have to offer. Again, embedding this idea of flexible workplace options, including part-time labor. And finally, I want to mention this, going back to the idea of designing age-friendly, livable communities as another initiative to kind of think about what do we mean by retirement security, what can communities at large do to support retirement security as it pertains to well-being in later life. And if we're designing livable communities, this may then offset some of the money individuals need to just get their basic needs met in retirement. For example, improvements in the physical infrastructure we've heard, such as the building of more accessible sidewalks and transportation, will increase the physical activity and social interaction of older adults. Increased physical activity and social interaction decreases public and personal costs related to illness and healthcare utilization. It also stimulates community service, volunteering, and philanthropic contributions through the social interaction opportunities. And we've talked about the importance of housing. Using principles of universal design can aid in the quality of aging in place, thereby reducing the need for public-funded facilities or privately funded home health or dependency on informal caregiving from family and friends. Design elements that increase accessibility of older adults also benefit younger generations. As you know, parents with strollers, children learning to walk, and people of all ages with mobility devices. And as you've heard from Neil and De La Torre in their report, the case for age-friendly communities are ones that are great places to grow up and to grow old. So, in conclusion, understanding the complexity of retirement security is especially important as the traditional retirement savings expectations cease to be applicable to future generations. And to address these challenges, one immediate solution is the intentional recruitment of older workers for the workplace, along with the promotion of flexible work options to accommodate them. And second, well-being in later life is a composite of many intersecting factors that may or may not be directly connected to personal income. So, attention to designing livable communities can aid everyone in understanding these intersections as part of a holistic perspective of quality of life and well-being for all ages. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robyn, and thank you to our whole panel. Thanks to our whole panel. So we have about 15 minutes left for questions or on this issue. So we have one right here. Microphone's coming around. The questions for the panel or observations? Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, that's fine,
What's-
but.
Oh,
When I went to college back during World War II, tuition was $300. I'm not sure whether that was for one semester or the whole year, but it is considerably more than that now. And so how do you figure inflation in with all of this? I keep seeing on TV that, you know, we will never raise your rates no matter what. No, but how about inflation? Is your money going to go as far?
anyone want to take that? Anyone on the panel want to take that?
College tuition
Yeah,
increases?
college tuition.
I mean, sure,
There's a
I
microphone
can. Oh. Well, I am employed at Oregon State University, where many conversations about how to offset the college tuition are taking place. It is a national debate. As you all know, state funding all over the country has steadily declined for our land-grant universities and others, and so oftentimes our universities are using the student tuition to fund their programs. I think we're going to see more and more opportunities for people for different ways to reduce those costs, but at the same time, I suspect that high tuition rates for students are here to stay. And again, it negatively impacts people's ability to save to start saving for retirement once they get out of school. I was meeting with I met a couple of law school graduates, 2 from private universities, 1 from public, last weekend, and they are starting their professional careers with $150,000 in debt. And I thought, that's a house. That's a house. So again, it's the reshaping of our landscape, and the financial literacy and retirement savings are very important.
Well, yes, and back in those days, it was either 16 cents or 17 or 18 cents a gallon. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just
Yeah.
college tuition.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything.
Yes.
Juanita?
Yeah, somebody in the audience
Oh, I'm sorry.
earlier made a comment about ageism and the way society looks at people as they get older and our attitudes. And I think that the issues that are, that you mentioned in terms of college tuition, just in general, the cost of living and a lot of other things, I think that is going to be up to us and to the coming generations to truly get engaged and ask for those changes. It is a societal issue that includes, impacts every one of us across economic lines. And I think that it has to be a political solution in terms of how our government manages the money that we pay as taxes. So, but I think it's a much, much larger issue that will need to be addressed through engagement, political engagement, and promoting those changes to take place.
Okay, do we have another questioner? Oh, wait a minute, we have a microphone coming around.
Could you wait?
We have a questioner here first. Okay,
So
go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Rothwell, for that. Actually, it was quite interesting. I just wanted to point out, prior to 1975, when all American women were pressured into getting married at all costs, I mean, they were legal children. They couldn't sign a contract. They couldn't apply for a loan. They couldn't apply for a credit card. They couldn't buy a car. They couldn't do anything without their husband's signature. So I do think that there's going to be cohort effects on financial literacy, and I think it's going to change over time. And what people don't get about the used to be 25 cents on the dollar for African Americans and 40 cents on the dollar for women compared to $1 for white males, what they don't get about that is that's why older women live in poverty. That's why older people of color live in poverty. That's why their children grow up in poverty. I mean, it is systemic, and I mean, we are probably at least 100 years from that ever going away, if it ever does.
Thank you. Okay, and someone else?
Oh, no, it's all right.
Okay.
I would like to know how European countries, Australia, Japan, can all sort of get their university students with no loans. They can pay for it by themselves.
You know, having had a daughter who went to school in Switzerland, she did graduate school in Switzerland, and it didn't matter whether you were born and raised in Switzerland or whether you were a student from another country. The government subsidized the tuition. Her tuition was $3,000 a year total to go to graduate school in Europe, because people, and I have a cousin who's a German cousin who runs an accounting firm, and as he says, in Europe, we believe in paying the taxes that it takes to pay for a quality of life for all.
I can also, I can speak a little bit to that also, having seen some of the, I'm working with the international data on that subject. Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I can speak a little bit also from a data perspective on national distributions of savings and wealth. And the US is a complete outlier when you look at Australia, the UK, Canada, in terms of people in the middle section of life building assets for later life. The US uniquely saddles this generation with student loan debt. Yeah, if you could remove, in other ways, what we're doing is if you could remove the student loan portion, we're on par with other countries, but it's the student loan debt that is putting people in financial precarity. And I just also wanted to agree with the other comment that there are going to be large cohort effects with this. Yeah.
Okay, we have some time for some more questions. Do we have
Some in the back.
back here? This is Naomi's exercise plan, healthy aging, laying the foundation early.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your presentation. And just to start with, if I may, just one program reminder. We do have one more presentation to come, so I do encourage you all to stick around for Dr. McQueen's presentation, as well as any networking afterwards. My question goes to Dr. Rothwell. Doctor, thank you for explaining some of the financial literacy differences among genders. If I get my math right, some of the education for those 65 and older, their formal education may have ended some 50 years ago. When you consider that, are you aware of any studies or comments in the literature about how much financial literacy is gained during formal education years, say up to 18 or 21, versus what people learn in their lifetime working?
That's a very good question, and using national survey data like this, we can understand the role. There's questions such as, have you taken financial education courses in the workplace, at a community setting, in some type of other education setting? And what we can see is that those people that have taken or received some type of education course around financial literacy, there are small improvements. They're not large, but they're statistically significant, but they're small effects.
Thank you, Doctor. And one final comment, if I may, and this is purely opinion. Given that we've been addressing financial literacy and planning for retirement at least a little bit, something I'd like to throw out to the group to maybe share with your friends and peers if you agree with me. I'm not a financial planner, but I am an attorney, and I don't think there's any legal obligation for parents to co-sign their student loans. And I would propose that perhaps there's not even a moral obligation. So everybody, do look after yourself as well as your children. Plan for your retirement, because what you do is important. And heaven knows, much of it may fall back on you. Thank you. That was purely opinion. Thanks.
Do we have another question? 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 Do we have Okay, so it looks like we've got a few minutes before break. I just wanted to make one final comment as the moderator of the panel. One of the things that I think in groups like this that we share in these kind of groups is the sense of the common good, that we're all trying to work towards the common good. And that's not universally shared in this country and in this society or in this state. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, whether we're trying to press for legislation or press for appropriate revenue, is to really keep the conversation at that asset base. You know, older workers are an asset to this community. They're providing for the financial security, the retirement security, the employment opportunities, adds to our economy, doesn't take from it. It's not a zero-sum game. There's plenty of economic models that show the more people that are working, the more people can work. The more jobs there are, the more the economy grows. So we're all in this together. We know this in the area of aging and retirement security, and we need to be taking that out to our friends and people out in the other community to try to talk about the common good and the importance of taking care of each of us and all of us at the same time. So thanks again for your support for this panel, and we do have a 15-minute break, and we'll be back at 4:15 for Dr. McQueen.